Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we are talking about the best decks to climb in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and with the new rank system that allows you to actually play post getting Master 1, we now have another thing that we can climb for. I'm just going to quickly go over all of the decks that I have here and rank them from Tier 1 to everything else. Tier 1 being very easily can get into Master 1 and climbs very well, to everything else being it is a pain. That's basically it. Let's just start off here. I believe this is mostly in alphabetical order. So there's that. Starting off here with the adventure stuff. Basically, this is the, adventure PK stuff, so I'm gonna put them basically in the same spot. And they're rogue. They're not really anything too interesting. The biggest problem is that they brick a lot. They have a lot of, stuff that just stops, generates bad hands, especially if you're playing hand traps. However, if you're not playing hand traps, you die going second. You just don't really have anything for going second. So it's one or the other. Either you're going to brick and be pretty inconsistent, or you're going to have a horrible time going second. So there's that. However, with that being said, if you get your combo, you basically win. So there you go. And basically any two level 3s do it. So it's not like it's horribly inconsistent. It's just that it does require, very specific draws. But those specific draws really do get you off to the races. Next up, we have Branded. Branded I'm going to put in Tier 2. Branded's still pretty good. It has a lot going for it in terms of the end boards, because the end boards are so difficult to deal with. And then you can also play things like the Gimmick Puppet Lock. You can also do the... Mirror Jade Pass if you get Max Seed and stuff like that, which can get you an insane amount of follow-up. Branded Fusion is really easy to access still, so it's not like it's that big of a deal that it's at 1. And yeah, for the most part, it's still very, very strong. Next up, we have Dragon Link, or I guess this is technically just Bestials, but I'm going to call it Dragon Link. Dragon Link I still think is fairly underrated. It's probably one of the most underrated decks currently in Master Duel, because the thing is, if you go, wait, hold on. Why are there? Okay, there are Bestials here, but then there's also Dragon Link. Dragons still have a lot of stuff available to them to actually warrant being played as a Dragon Link strategy. You still have all the Dragoonity stuff. You still have all of most of the Chaos stuff. You still have the Bestials. You still have this, that, or the other thing. Now the Bestials aren't exactly great right now, which is the biggest downside to it, but for the most part, it basically does the same thing that the Phantom Knights do, probably just a little bit worse, because they can't play as many hand traps. Dragon Link was basically Snake Eye before Snake Eye showed up, with being able to play a whole bunch of hand traps and then have a whole bunch of one-card starters. So there you go. Next up, we have Chimera. Chimera I'm going to put into Tier 3. I think Chimera is okay. It has a lot of, recursion. Not recursion. It has a lot of gas. It has a lot that it can do. It can push through boards pretty well due to things like Guardian Chimera and having access to multiple of the Quick Play Fusion, or being able to do that multiple times per turn. But for the most part, it's not insane in any capacity. It does have the ability to, break boards, but it also doesn't really set up the strongest of boards, so its boards do get broken pretty easily. Like a normal summon Snake Eye Ash, if you don't have the answer to it, does kind of just cook you. So there you go. Dark World doesn't do anything in this day and age. Without Silva, the deck doesn't do anything. It spins its wheels and then it dies. Yeah, that's kind of it. DDD, I feel, is very similar. It doesn't really have anything going for it. Its end board is very mediocre unless you get a very good hand or uninterrupted, which is highly unlikely. And then on top of that, it just doesn't really have a whole lot in terms of board breaking presence. So yeah, it doesn't really do anything. Dinos, I think, are fairly good right now, given the fact that they got a lot of new tools to give them access to a better end board, or a more consistent end board, I should say, which allows them to actually, put up such a formidable end board to really make it a pain, And they also have a fairly decent time playing into things like Maxi, playing into things like other such hand traps due to Miscellaneousaurus. And because of Miscellaneousaurus, if you don't have the answer to that card, your end board probably doesn't matter, and they can just play through it very easily because of like UCT and stuff like that. So all in all, they do have a lot of tools available to them, and it's not... I guess the biggest issue is that they do brick pretty consistently. So, you know what? I forgot about that. I'd put it down. But if they don't brick, they have like really good tools. Dinomorphia's pretty mid, honestly. I've yet to see Dinomorphia really do anything. In theory, it does like skill drain stuff or like Baguska stuff, where it's like, oh, you can't activate cards. Ha ha ha. But in reality, for the most part, like, because of how diverse the format is, and I know people are going to be like, oh, it's just Snake Eye. No, it's not. It's never been just one deck, except for when Tearlament was tier 0. But even then, like, the format was still diverse, especially in Master Duel, because it's best of one, because it's specifically the ladder, where people are not going to play the meta, and people are going to try and climb by playing anti-meta, and stuff like that. Dinomorphia suffers because of that, right? Because of the fact that there are so many just random decks. There's like Stun, there's like, Labyrinth, there's the wide variety of like decks that just have inherent back row removal or that don't need to activate effects like Horus right now and stuff like that. So for the most part, or they go second, which also sucks. So for the most part, I don't think they're very good. Dogmatica is just so incredibly bricky. So yeah. Exosister is Rogue. I know a lot of people really enjoy this deck and always think that it's a really good anti-meta option when a graveyard deck shows up. However, the problem with Exosister is twofold. One, it's inconsistent. If you get your combo started, sure, it does quite a lot, in theory. But you do have to get your combo started, which is very, very easy to interrupt. Imperm on basically any of the Xyz really hurts. Ash on Martha, and, basically any of the hand traps do work against this deck. You can even hold Imperm for the Magnifica to force that out, to basically force the opponent into having significantly less cards, or interruptions, right? And stuff like that. And two, if you don't get interrupted, your end board can be played through pretty easily. Because of the way that it works, it's not stopping the opponent from playing, it's removing pieces from the field, which means something like Snake Eye, something like Fire King doesn't really care, because each one of their cards basically generates another card, and so they can just play through it. They also have bad matchups against a lot of the metagame. However, they still have the ability to go first and potentially set up a very, very strong end board against very specific decks, and more specifically, they do have Shifter. So there you go. And next up, we have Fire King. Now, I believe Fire King Snake Eye is also on here, and we're gonna... I guess we'll talk about them separately. But Fire King Snake Eye is obviously the best deck. It is recursive, it is impactful, it has big combo energy with the Snake Eye stuff, and then it can also play through Max C because of the Fire King stuff. It has the ability to destroy boards, it has the ability to play second, it can play a bunch of hand traps, it just does everything right now, and yeah, it's very, very strong. As for Fire King, I'm going to put it in tier 2. I think pure Fire King is fairly decent. However, the biggest downside with pure Fire King is the fact that if you don't have enough to break the board, you do just kind of lose going second. And you can brick pretty often, right? Because you just have less starters, which is why you play the Snake Eye stuff. Yeah, so like sometimes you could draw like Arvada, and then it's like, well, great, now I have a negate, but that negate doesn't do anything. So, it's like you really need to see very specific pieces in order for you to kind of play the game. You need to see a Garunix, you need to see a Ponix, you need to see the ability to pop a Barong to search a card, you need to see a Fire King Island, something along those lines, right? And if that gets interrupted, you kind of can't do anything. But outside of that, it is way more difficult to deal with than Branded. It has an insane grind game. If it gets started, it's very difficult for it to get stopped. Next up, we have Flu, which is just good. It's just good. The thing with Flu is Link monsters are really good right now. They're really, really good right now. You know, like SP Little Knight and stuff like that. So, yeah, M-Pen is kind of crazy. If you just set up an M-Pen, a lot of decks are going to not have an answer to that. They are inconsistent. They've always been inconsistent, so that's not anything new. And, yeah, but they also play around Max C, which means the biggest hand trap doesn't matter to them. And that really does help. They can also play Shifter. So, there you go. Sprite for Hire Runic, I believe is what this is. Oh, technically it's this. Okay, well, okay. For Hire, Sprite for Hire Runic is not very good right now. It's not insanely bad, but it's just not nearly as strong, mostly due to the fact that the Runic cards are significantly weaker, and it's just not really in a good spot in the meta. The thing with this deck is that it really is meta-reliant. If the metagame allows for slower decks, or more like mid-range decks, to thrive, then this deck is really, really good. If you have the ability to play, like, board breakers, then this deck is really, really good. But yeah, as of right now, you gotta play hand traps, and this deck can't really play hand traps, which makes it significantly worse. And next up, we have Gold Pride. Is this just Gold Pride? Is there like a Gold Pride punk on here? Me parece que no. Okay, so, yeah, in terms of Gold Pride, I would put this in Rogue. Yeah. Gold Pride's just not very good right now. I don't really know what to say. There's not really much to say about it. It's just... It's not a strong combo deck. Like, the combo's just not very good. So, yeah. Next up, we have Hero. Hero is always tier 3. Hero right now can play Macrocosmos, which is pretty good. And, yeah, just overall is... Yeah, okay, I say Hero can play Macrocosmos, but it's more so Dark Law exists, therefore Hero is good. And Hero always is fairly decent due to the fact that it can just combo for days and play uninterrupted, which is very, very strong. Next up, we have Horus. Horus Stun is not very good. I know a lot of people like Horus Stun. It's not very strong. And that would be the regular Horus stuff. If we're talking about the other Horus decks, which we will do, we'll get into those in a second. There's a lot of them. I'll save Horus tier for now. But I'll bring it up a little. As far as Horus Stun is concerned, it's not very strong. I think regular Stun is actually just better. In fact, I'm actually going to put regular Stun in tier 3. The thing with regular Stun is that it just... Like, it's just good against a lot of decks. Just normal summon a guy that... Great, now you can't special summon. It does have a lot of weaknesses. I don't think it's as strong as people think it is. But it's still good. It is still a best of one format, and people aren't going to be main decking a lot of outs to this. I think a lot of people are main decking outs to a lot of the stun shenanigans, but that doesn't mean that they're main decking a lot of outs, right? And sometimes it's more so about how many outs you see across the course of your turns, as opposed to necessarily what outs you see, right? So there's that. But even with that being said, Stun's very strong. Horus Stun, not so much. It's kind of the stun version of like a combo deck, or it's like I don't know. It doesn't really work. It's kind of relying on too many pieces just going well, and seeing those pieces pretty well, and it tends to not work. Because it's like, cool, I have to draw these very specific cards, but also if I draw them without seeing the Horus stuff, I do just lose. It's like, so it's like, it's harder to establish stun, but if you do establish it, you do just kind of win the game, and you win the game like that. But it's just more difficult for that to happen. You die to hand traps much more often than regular stun. Next up, we have Naturia Horus, which is just not good. It's not. Here's the thing. Naturia has better versions of its own deck. right? Naturia is a fairly competent strategy and can help you climb. Naturia Horus is the worst version of that. Just play the runic cards. The runic cards fulfill a lot of the strategy way more effortlessly and help you in almost every regard more than the Horus cards do, right? I think a lot of people are just saw the Horus cards and were like, wow, you can fit this in anything. And then they proceeded to do that and didn't really think, like, should they, right? So there's that. Next up we have Horus Orcust, which actually makes the deck fairly good. Yeah, I'd probably put it in tier 3. The thing is, this is just, like, objectively making both decks better. It gives you good discards for the Horus stuff, which means you then get all of your Orcust stuff into the grave, which gets that entire combo started. So they basically just synergize really well with each other, and it really is one of the things that synergizes the best. Because you can slap down a rank 8, which could either be Dingirsu, which also does your combo, which is really, really cool, or you could make Photon Lord, which is a negate, which protects you from things like Nibiru, or Ash, or whatever it may be. Probably not Ash, because you probably got Ashed at that point, or you would have been Ashed at that point, but, like, you know, Valor or what have you, which is really, really nice. So, all in all, it makes sense, and it's just, like, objectively a good strategy. The PK stuff is similar, but I would say it's still weaker, because the PK stuff doesn't really need the Horus stuff to kind of combo off, and in fact, still wants cards on field and stuff like that. Putting the cards into the grave is nice, but it's not as impactful as the Orcust stuff, because, like, putting a Harpor in the grave is way more impactful than putting, like, a Ragged Gloves or a Cloak or something like that in grave. They're still good, but not as good, right? So yeah, the Orcust stuff kind of just combos off because a card went to the graveyard, whereas this is like, cool, now I get a card. So it's just the difference of how Orcust works versus how Phantom Knights work. Next up we have Cybers. Now, okay, I'm gonna put Cybers right here. Because basically these two decks are the same thing. You either are playing the Adagnister stuff and doing the same thing that the Circular deck is doing, or you're playing Circular with Mathmech and you're doing the exact same thing that the Adagnister deck is doing. It's basically just vomit out a whole bunch of cards in order to go into big, powerful Link monsters that allow you to play a whole bunch of hand traps as well. So they're fairly decent right now, and for the most part, the main reason is due to the fact that they have hand traps and have the ability to make this big wombo combo board that just kills the opponent, right? And on top of that, they can go second very well into Max C and an established board, because basically any two monsters kills you because of Update Jammer, Access Code. Hooray! So yeah, if they can get 2 to 3 monsters on their side of the field, they can Update Jammer, Access Code Talker into nuke your field, into attack you for well over lethal. And they can do that through Max C, and they can do that in this way or that way or the other way, and it's really frustrating. The thing is, going first into Max C is not nearly as good for them, but alas, they can play like Gamma if they really wanted to. But overall, yeah, they're still very strong. Infernoble is a bit underrated. I think it's very, very strong, but it does lose to like Imperm and Valor and stuff like that. And it is a bit inconsistent. However, overall the combo is really powerful, and it is one of the highest win rate combos. If it finishes the combo, it wins. Like 100% of the time. Almost. It's like 89% of the time or something ridiculous like that. So if you end up doing the Isold combo for Infernoble, the game is basically over. There are so few decks that can play through that. Next up we have Kashtira. The thing with Kashtira is that it is so inconsistent, and it can die to a myriad of different hand traps, that honestly it just doesn't do enough. Right? At least by itself. It's basically become a stun deck, but like you're probably better off just playing regular stun as opposed to the Kashtira stuff, because at least with regular stun, it's going to be more consistent, That's basically it. Now, Konami does have some sort of weird shenanigans going on with the Master Duel Shuffler, and basically you're never going to not draw a Unicorn if you were playing Kashtira, so I don't know. Maybe it's not actually inconsistent, and Master Duel will just love you, and so maybe you should try it. I wouldn't suggest that, because I know as soon as I say this, it's going to immediately flip, and Konami's going to be like, turn the switch. Nope, don't do that. You are now going to brick on every single Kashtira hand. Guaranteed. Next up we have Labyrinth. Labyrinth is tier 1. Labyrinth is very, very good because of the fact that it is a best of 1 format, which means that the deck is incredibly strong. It's not nearly as strong as Fire King Snake Eye. I shouldn't say it's not nearly as strong. It's not as dominant as Fire King Snake Eye, but it does have the capacity of basically OTKing anyone, or OTKing, but like basically winning the game like that, right? Because of going first, because of not really needing to play into Max C, or not really caring about Max C, right? Being able to play around a lot of the good hand traps right now, like Veilers and Imperms and stuff like that, they don't really care about, because they can play during the opponent's turn, which is very nice. And then on top of that, having the ability to consistently have cards is very nice. Just trap cards in general are fairly good in best of 1s because of the fact that people can't really prepare for them nearly as well, or for the most part, don't really prepare for them because of the fact that there aren't as many decks that play those trap cards, right? Like, of these top decks, how many of them are setting more than 1 card? You know, it's not really worth it to play Lightning Storms and evenly matches and stuff like that. So there's that. Next up we have Live Twin, which is not a good deck. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I'm actually gonna move a few cards or a few decks down. No, you can stay there. But yeah, all in all, Live Twin is not a good deck. However, Live Twin Sprite, which I would imagine is on here, is fairly decent. Sprite did just get Jetback. Okay, it's not that good. They did just get Jetback to 2, which does matter, especially for like Live Twin Sprite. But all in all, the Sprite variants, which I actually do want to talk about now, the Sprite variants are actually fairly decent as of right now. Mostly due to the fact that just Sprite in general right now is pretty nice because of, like, people are playing hand traps, yes, but the fact of the matter is, like, Sprite can kind of just play through a lot of those hand traps fairly decently, besides, obviously, Max C. As well as they can force out specific interactions and end on kind of a weak board that still kind of does a lot because of Elf. So, you know, you can get stopped by 3 hand traps and still play through it, depending on your hand. And you can also play a bunch of hand traps yourself as well. Maybe not the most, but like Live Twin Sprite does happen to be able to play a whole lot. You can also play Sprite as just like a more or less regular deck, with more like Sprite and a bunch of just random 2s, without like a specific synergistic strategy behind it. I think it's weaker than just playing like Live Twin or Tri-Brigade or Runic even. So there's that. But for the most part, like, hey, you can play a lot of hand traps if you do that, right? Which is fairly decent. Next up, we have the Runic variant. I think the Runic variant of Sprite is the weakest, but still very good. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna move all of these up a tier. I think they're strong enough. Yeah, I think they're all fairly decent and definitely competitive in terms of the metagame. I'm actually going to move Kashtira below them. I don't think Kashtira is nearly as strong. Same with Stun. Same with Phantom Knights. Actually, Phantom Knights, you can go at the end of this. But yeah, the Sprite stuff is very good. And then we have the best Sprite deck, which is Sprite Tri-Brigade. The thing is, the Sprite Tri-Brigade list allows you to play through hand traps very, very well, because you can get either the Tri-Brigade engine or the Sprite engine online. If you get either of those online, depending on how many hand traps your opponent has, can be quite significant, right? Because if your opponent hand traps you 3 times and they have 3 cards on turn 2, and you just have like the Tri-Brigade engine, that should be enough, right? Unless they normal summon Snake Eye Ash, in which case, oops. But like, you know, what if you have a hand trap, right? And then it may be enough, right? Or, you know, if you get the Sprite engine online, right? As long as you get, like, something, and, you know, you still have access to Elf, you still have access to, like, Samorg, if you want to play that. You can, like, set Revolt at any time, which is really, really good, just banishing a card. Especially Revolt right now, or I should say Shureg right now, is really good because of the Fire King stuff. So, you know, hey, a Fire King shows up, you're just like, well, I'm going to banish that, and now you can't destroy it, which means it's not going to trigger, which is great. But you can also banish the field spell, which is also pretty good. So there's that. But then, yeah, you also just get a really strong end board if your opponent doesn't interact with you, which is very, very nice. So there's that. Next up, we have Mana. Mana is just not very good. It's like this hyper wombo combo deck that doesn't really do all that much. Outside of that, you know? And yeah, that's basically it. Its end board is actually very breakable if it gets interrupted, like, once. If it doesn't get interrupted, it's crazy. It goes crazy. However, if it does get interrupted, it's pretty mediocre. Next up, we have Marincess. Marincess is fine. It's a reasonable Cyber deck. Yeah, that's basically it. It doesn't really do anything too interesting outside of, like, Zelantis away the entire board, which is kind of funny. But they'd have to get to Zelantis, which is not exactly the most consistent thing. Next up, we have Memento. Memento is pretty weak, I'm not gonna lie. I think it may be a little bit stronger than Dinomorphia, but not by much. The main reason for this is due to the fact that, like, the deck doesn't really do all that much. Like, it can play through a bunch of hand traps, which is nice, but, like, the end board is so easily disrupted. Not disrupted. Played through. Like, you can literally just play through it with, like, almost any of these decks. So, yeah, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter even if they get their full combo. So there's that. Next up, we have Makonko. Makonko's just not very good right now. The main thing with Makonko is, like, oh, you want to go second, right? Because then you can, like, OTK your opponent. But the thing is, with the amount of hand traps that are being played, it's like, well, even if you do end up going second, what's the likelihood you even get the ability to, like, get to that OTK spot? And it's very, very slim. Because either you're going to be interacted with before that happens, or you're going to be interrupted in, like, a wide variety of cases through, like, you know, cards being removed, or, you know, having non-target destruction removal, or having your search get ashed, or whatever it may be. Like, you're probably just not getting there. Orcust by itself is bad. Punk by itself is kind of mid as well. Yeah, we'll put it here for now. Purrely's another tier 1 deck. The problem with Purrely is that you have to be good at the deck. I've said this time and time again. Every time Purrely comes up, Purrely, you got to be good at the deck. If you're good at the deck is fantastic. If you're not good at the deck is pretty mid. We saw this in the Duelist Cup. So there's that. You know, if you're prepared to play against specific deck, or if you just know how to play the deck is fine. 3 Sleepy Memory is crazy. There you go. Rescue Ace is also pretty good. Probably the second best deck, or I should say, yeah, Rescue Ace Snake Eye. Rescue Ace by itself. We're just not going to talk about that one. Rescue Ace Snake Eye, or the Rescue Ace, like, Diabell Star engine. Very, very strong. Gives you access to a set 4 pass, which not a lot of decks can compete with. More specifically, those 2 traps, Extinguish and Contain, are very, very strong, especially if you know how to use them. And sometimes most players don't, but that's beside the point. If you know how to use it, then yeah, it should be really good for you. So there you go. Next up, we have Rika. Rika's fairly decent. Okay, I have too many decks in here. Too many decks. Okay, stun is tier 3 at the very least. I'm actually gonna move these guys up. I'm gonna move them up. Yep. Yep. You heard me. Yep. We're moving them up. That's right. Anyway, what was I saying? Rika's good. Rika is fine. Probably better than Sprite stuff, but not better. Probably better than Chimera. Yeah. Rika has, like, big wombo combo energy, but does kind of falter to 1 or 2 hand traps sometimes. However, the biggest thing is Maxi. It has a major issue against Maxi, both going first and going second. It can't really play a lot of hand traps, which means that you're basically relying on hoping that your opponent doesn't know how your combo works, which is likely. And so because of that, it does fairly well. But even with that being said, going second into a fully established any of these boards is going to be a problem for this deck. Unless you happen to draw your board breakers, which is not exactly consistent, but also not inconsistent. It's just like, you don't really generate enough advantage to really push through boards consistently without some assistance. And we don't have the new Ragnarika stuff and all of that jazz. So, yeah, it's good. I hate to say it, but it is. Just ban Con, please. Runic Stun is just mid. It's not very good right now. Salamangreat's pretty good. Probably tier 2. Yeah, Salamangreat has a lot going for it. It can play a lot of hand traps while also doing this big wombo combo style like the other cyber strategies. It's basically just another cyber strategy. Yeah, I'm not going to explain that one. Sky Striker's pretty mid. Yeah. Sky Striker, I know a lot of people really like Sky Striker. It is one of the most overrated decks in Master Duel, and it is not close. This deck is just not very good right now. Having a control deck that wants to specifically go second and play a whole bunch of like bait power spells is not very strong. It's just not. If you want to play like a hand trap variant as well, you're just missing out on a lot of the advantage that you generate from the Sky Striker cards, even though Engage is at 3, which is stupid. I hate that card. That card is so absurd. It's so silly. Just ban that card, give them everything else, and give them a new card that just searches a spell or something like that, just searches a card but doesn't draw a card, and it'd be fine. It'd be fine. It'd be totally fine. Maybe give them like, you know, if it has 3 spells, it like gains you 1,000 life points or something stupid like that, because the search spell already is insane. Anyway, that's all. Overall, Sky Striker's fine. It's not crazy. It's not crazy. It's fine. It can beat you. It can go second and like break your board and play really well. It can also go first and just like set like a bunch of Widow Anchors or something like that, which is fairly decent. But for the most part, like, it's not really doing anything, and it doesn't put up enough pressure fast enough for a lot of these really fast decks. Purrely, Fire King, Branded, Mathmech, or any of these other combo decks, Rescue Ace, all of these are just faster and more threatening immediately, which Sky Striker kind of can't deal with. Pure Snake Eye is still tier 1. I think we really underestimated how strong this deck still is. You can still play a lot of the other strategy, or a lot of the other like supplementary cards to give you access to a bunch of this stuff. You can play Small World, you can play the Kashtira engine, you can play Horus if you want. I wouldn't suggest it, but you could, right? You could play, you know, a myriad of other strategies, and just playing like a whole bunch of hand traps is still very strong, and I'd say it's still very, very competent. I don't know why Skill Drain is on here, because we've already talked about Stun. Tearlament. Tearlament is also tier 1. I'm going to put it up here in tier 1, probably above Purrely. Tier Horus, or more specifically just Tier, is very, very competent right now. Having access to Kit Colors is insane, and with the Horus stuff, it gives you access to the Zombie Vampire, which is really, really good, because, hey, milling cards is pretty nice, and that's basically it. Tearlament does Tearlament things and has access to the ability to do the Tearlament stuff, which means it's pretty dang good. That's all. I think Superheavy Samurai is one of the most underrated decks currently in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. It still does Superheavy Samurai stuff. Yes, the limitation to this card in particular did hurt. Does it matter? Probably not. It still just does the big wombo combo end boards and can play a lot of hand traps, especially Gamma. Gamma is so good right now. We already talked about Tier. Sword Soul's fine. It's okay. It doesn't really do anything in particular. It's not really too strong into the current metagame, and that's basically it. Thunder Dragons, I believe they got Colossus back. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really change anything. Trap Trick is so mid. Tri-Brigade by itself is fine. There's a lot that Tri-Brigade itself can do. Most notably, if you're playing a pure version of Tri-Brigade, you can play a whole bunch of hand traps and going second options, which is pretty nice. And then you can kind of just like break boards pretty efficiently. Honestly, it's probably a better going second deck than it is a going first deck, just due to the fact that drawing that 6th card is pretty useful for this deck. And like breaking boards is pretty easy if you have a bunch of those going second cards. So yeah, but with that being said, you still want to go first. Anyway, next up we have Unchained. Unchained, I would say, is probably the most underrated deck currently in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I'm going to put it up here with Cybers. Here's the thing. The deck is difficult, similar to Purrely. Hey, look at that. I put them right next to each other. If you are good at the deck is crazy. And just beats, like, everything, except for one card, and that is the Roach. However, you do have answers to the Roach with Called By and Ash Blossom, so you're not always guaranteed to just lose to the Roach. And if you want to, you can even play Gamma and have it work fairly well, right? So it's not the end-all be-all that a lot of people make it out to be. It is annoying, but yeah, it's a best of one. You can just kind of ignore it for the most part and be like, yep, this is fine. And then your end boards are crazy, and like so few decks can beat it. Velmonica is very overrated. Same with probably the most overrated deck, Vanquish Soul. Look, I love playing Vanquish Soul. It's very fun. It's ass. It's so bad. It is incredibly slow. It doesn't really put up a whole lot of pressure. It relies on drawing very specific hands. It needs you to see something like Raisin to get you into the game, right? Or like a Heavy Borger with a way to use the Heavy Borger to draw cards. It's very, very specific. And for the most part, yes, if you draw Raisin, it's crazy. It's so good. And it can play Shifter. Whoa. But like, for the most part, if you don't draw Raisin or you don't draw Shifter, you just get cooked. You just get cooked. And I know a lot of people will say this. So many people are like, yo, Vanquish Soul going second. It's crazy. And in reality, it's not. Because it does not break boards very well. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it breaks boards really well. It doesn't. It doesn't. They're lying to you. They're tricking you. It does not break boards very well. It can play into boards very well. And it can establish its own board through an opponent's board. But it doesn't break boards. And it doesn't deal with what the opponent has established very well. Outside of, like, very specific hands. Like, if you're able to get a Caesar Valius into rotation and pop a card, and then, like, walk over a card, maybe, but that's, like, very specific, and realistically doesn't happen very often. Next up, we have Pendulum. Pendulum is probably another one of the very, very overrated cards, or decks. The new Pendulum Zark stuff is fine. It's fine. It does the same thing that Pendulum did previously. And a lot of people, what I've noticed is a lot of people are currently playing it with no hand traps. Please play hand traps. Please put hand traps into your list. You don't need all of the engine pieces that you did previously. That's kind of the point of the new Zark stuff. You can now play hand traps, and they're just better. Just play the hand traps. They're going to be better. For right now, I'm going to say it's Rogue. I could be wrong about this. I do not know enough about the Pendulum deck, but for the most part, I feel like this deck is just not very good. Next up, we have Fire King Tri-Brigade, which is very strong. It has all of the Fire King stuff, and the Tri-Brigade stuff does help it. It does kind of hinder it because you're not doing the Fire King stuff as much, but you can play Tri-Brigade, which is based. So there you go. Well, I mean, this deck is okay. All three of these decks are the exact same. They're all the exact same. Punk. Other thing. Punk, Gold Pride, Rogue. There you go. Okay, we already talked about this and this. Okay, so these are all the decks that actually matter. So yeah, all in all, I think that this is a rather diverse format. And while there are a lot of fire decks that are currently running around, most notably the Fire King and the Rescue Ace, I still think that those decks are not the end-all be-all. I think that they are definitely a lot more beatable in a best of one, as well as a lot more beatable just in general right now, due to the Wanted and Snake Eye Ash and stuff like that being limited. It makes the deck a lot more susceptible to interruptions and interactions. So there's that. But yeah, all in all, that's kind of it. Let me know what you think down below. Also, if you got to this point, you probably didn't watch the video. Go back and watch the video and hear my thoughts on any of these specific decks. If you want to know, there you go. Go watch the video. Because I know you just skipped to the end. I know you did. I know you. You skipped to the end just to see what my thoughts are. You know what? I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to move some things so that people now have to think about their choices and have to say like, whoa, what the fuck? What's happening? How did this tier list come out this way? And now everyone will be confused. Anyway, yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy it, and if you did, I like it very much, so appreciate it. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.